Hey everybody, this is Kevin Wallace, double CCA and Cisco Press author, and I want to welcome you to this special webinar replay where our very own Charles Judd, our security expert here at KW Train, is going to take you on a cyber ops journey. He'll talk theory just a bit, but then he's going to go out and do some really cool cyber ops demos for you. I think you'll find it fascinating, and I encourage you to stick around to the end of the webinar because then I'm going to come back and let you know how you can go deeper on a regular basis with Charles into the world of cybersecurity, and I'm going to be offering a discount available only to webinar viewers. But for now, let's join Charles in the webinar.
Again, I want to welcome you. My name is Charles Judd. If you were not with me for my first webinar last month, I just want to say welcome, and I'm glad you've chosen to spend some time out of your day and come and see me and spend that with me. So I know how important your time is. I know how valuable that is. So I do appreciate you guys spending some time with me. It's going to be a shorter webinar this time around, definitely under an hour. So just FYI, it'll be a quickie. But anyway, let me share, in case you wasn't with me last time, let me share just a little bit about my own background. Get my screen up here for you. And just a little bit about me. So I am, again, my name is Charles Judd. I joined the KW Train team in January of this year. I've known Kevin for many years, actually. We've been good friends for several years. So I was honored that Kevin asked me to come on board, and I'm just loving it. Really enjoy training, really enjoy interacting with all of you folks and all of your input that you've had. So thank you so much, by the way, for the warm welcome to the KW Train team. I had so many folks reach out through social media, through email, and through all kinds of different channels and speak to me about that. So I do appreciate that. I joined, as I said, in January of 2018, and I'm currently developing the CCNA Cyber Ops courses. That's what I'm working on at the moment. I spent a decade programming CNC equipment. If anyone is familiar with CNC machinery, computer numerical control, did that for almost 10 years. Running computer-operated mills and lathes and building plastic injection molding. So it was an interesting field. I enjoyed it a lot. And then I moved on to some freelance work. I did freelance graphic and web design as well as IT consulting, and got my CCNA route and switch and moved into the world of networking. Got my bachelor's in network security. Currently working on my CCNP track, so going through that. And then I worked for a large MSP, a multi-service provider, and we focused on HIPAA-compliant IT. And we service folks from anywhere from veterinarians to pediatricians to insurance marketing agencies, anybody who needed HIPAA-compliant IT, and which is, if anyone's familiar with HIPAA compliance, it is a specialty. It's a very special niche. And there's a lot of things that go along with having HIPAA-compliant IT. So that's how I kind of cut my teeth in the security world. And then I've got, because of the multi-service provider background, I've got experience with a lot of different network and server technologies, whether those are physical topologies, virtual topologies, a lot of different network setups, and a lot of different software. So it was a really good background for me to jump into the IT world. So that's a little bit about me, and I know some of you guys were with me last time, so you may have heard all that before. So, but I just wanted to give everyone a background of where I come from and what I'm all about. And I love teaching. I love talking about security. As I said, I'm in the middle of those cyber ops courses. Those are going to be done really quickly, and I hope you guys are excited. Some of you guys may not even really know a lot about what cyber ops is all about. I did see some questions in the chat about what's the difference in cyber ops and some other tracks? Well, cyber ops is more of an entry-level field for security operations centers. So if you want to be a security analyst, and maybe you're not as interested in the hardcore routing and switching world, it's definitely the other side of that. It doesn't require a lot of routing and switching knowledge. However, it does focus on that entry-level security analyst stuff. So what are we going to be talking about today? As I said, it'll be a little bit shorter webinar than we did last time because I want to get you guys out. I want to respect your time. And some of the topics we're going to cover today, we're going to touch on topics from both exams. We're going to touch on passive reconnaissance, active reconnaissance, both of those. What do those mean? What's the differences in those? We're going to talk about open source intelligence. We're going to talk about social engineering a bit. We'll do a few live lab demos. So reconnaissance. What is reconnaissance? Reconnaissance is basically in the computer world. Reconnaissance is learning as much as you possibly can about a host or about a network. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And primarily, you may be wondering, why do I need to know about reconnaissance? I'm a good guy. Well, if you've heard of the term pen testing or penetration testing, that's what we should do to our own networks. We should test our own networks for vulnerabilities. And if we find holes in our network, we can oftentimes do that through reconnaissance, through the same methods that an attacker would use to come into our networks. And as I said, there are a lot of different ways to do that. And the main method to start out with is called passive reconnaissance. And passive reconnaissance is a hands-off approach. It's trying to gain recon on a network or on an environment without touching it in any way, physically or logically. And there are a lot of ways that's done, and primarily it's done through open source intelligence, or OSINT, as it's called in the security world. And open source intelligence can come from a lot of different places. It can come from things like, you can start at the big boy with Google. We know Google has tons and tons of information out there. And as a matter of fact, let me see if we can pull up my browser here. If we go, let's see, Chuck Robbins, the Cisco CEO. If we do a search on Chuck Robbins, there's tons of hits. Now, granted, Chuck Robbins is a fairly high-profile guy. But if you haven't ever Google searched your own name, I suggest you give that a try. You may actually be surprised at the amount of information that can be pulled up. You can find images, you can find lots of information. You can probably find, I would imagine, pictures of his house if you wanted to. But Google is a huge, Google is a huge source of open source intelligence, and one of the first places that an attacker might turn to try to find important information about something or about a company. Now, another one is DNS lookup. You can look up DNS information on specific domains. Social media is huge. You guys are probably familiar with the hot water that Facebook is in over the past couple of weeks, because they let a data analytics firm kind of run wild with some user information. And so the amount of data that is captured by social media sites is amazingly large. And not only, this was a case of what they are classifying as a security breach or a security mishandling, but not only those kind of cases, but if you think about all of the information that we voluntarily give out through social media, if you go to someone's social media page, you can find out tons and tons of information about them. And not only that, but it's a huge point of social engineering. You see all these you see these Facebook surveys that will ask you, find out your clown name by taking the name of the street that you grew up on and combining it with your mother's maiden name or something silly like that, and then post it. Well, that's a type of social engineering that people don't even realize they're being manipulated. They're posting important information that are often used as security questions to recover passwords, or sometimes people will even use those answers for their passwords commonly. So people are being socially engineered through all kinds of social media sites. And Facebook's a huge target. LinkedIn is a huge target because it's a professional network. So those are all sources of passive reconnaissance. And if the passive reconnaissance brings enough important information, if a target looks interesting enough through the passive look, then an attacker will often move on to active reconnaissance. And active reconnaissance, as you can imagine, is directly interacting with the network in some way. And there are a lot of different automated tools that can do this. And one of those that we talk about, and that's talked about quite often in the cyber ops world, is, inside of Kali Linux, there's a tool called Nmap. And what Nmap can do, it's got a lot of different functions actually, but two of the common active reconnaissance methods of Nmap are ping sweeps and doing port scans. And so we'll just demonstrate that. I've got a couple of VMs running here. I'm going to pull up my Ubuntu VM, and I'm just going to find the IP address of that machine. If we go over to our Kali Linux box and we go under Nmap, and we can do a ping sweep on the subnet that this machine is on. So it'll be 241-0/24. And if we can do a ping sweep on that entire subnet, and you can see that there are tons of hits on this one. And they're all my virtual machines, by the way. I have lots of virtual machines running. So on the same subnet I've set aside for my VMs, you can see that it's found 6 hosts up on that. And so that's a way that an attacker may move on to some sort of active reconnaissance and try to find out what kind of hosts are on the network that are going to respond to a ping command. And that's very helpful information to have. Another feature of Nmap that you can do is we can do that port scan. And if we do, we can do it directly on the IP address of this virtual machine. And you see that this says it scanned all 1,000 scanned ports are closed. So my Ubuntu box is fairly secure. Now, a different story, I have a Windows VM running, fairly unsecure Windows VM, fairly unpatched. So I would imagine that this is going to bring back a little different result. Let's see if we can find the IP address, and we'll pop that in our Nmap. And yes, we have several ports that are listed as open in this example. So that is an example of something that an attacker would do with Nmap, just a very basic example. Now, as I said, there are tons of tools in Kali Linux for active and passive reconnaissance, and this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to that. So another one that we can do, let's see, there's a tool inside of Kali Linux called the Harvester. And the Harvester, if we get that going, you can see there are tons of different options in here. And what the Harvester does is it will scan, in this example, the way that we're going to use it, it will scan Google for specific email addresses found on the domain. So if we do the Harvester, we'll do a -D, and that tells it which domain you want to search. And we'll just do Microsoft.com. -L sets the limit of searches that you want to do. Now Google kind of limits this, and they don't like you to just pound their search with automated tools. So we'll set it to a limit of 500. And again, we're using Google. You can see this automated tool will come up and it'll start searching Google. It will go through all the numbers of search results that we've asked for. Now we've set our limit to 500, and you can see in this one it only found 1 email at the moment. Looks like it's still thinking about it. Yeah, there we go. And so you can see it also will resolve host names and IP addresses. So if we run it one more time just to make sure we don't get any more results. And as I said, the more that you use this, a lot of times Google will kind of shut you down and limit you to that. So this WSL Partners at Microsoft is the hit that it came up with. Now, I ran this before a couple of days ago and got many more addresses as opposed to that. So one important thing that gives you is it gives you a good idea of the types of naming conventions that may be used in a corporate email address. So if this had returned a specific first initial and obvious last name, such as J. Smith at Microsoft.com, then we would know that that's most likely a naming convention that Microsoft is using. And then we could use that in all sorts of things, but it's commonly used in phishing attempts. Large amounts of phishing emails will be sent out with a specific format depending on what the company uses. So if we know that Microsoft used first initial and last name, for example, we can start tailoring specific phishing attempts to look at that. And another tool that I have on here that I want to show you is called Prowl. Go into Prowl. Let's see. Then Prowl runs on Python. Go into Prowl, and we can do the same. We can use what we've learned about Microsoft, just for example. We'll use that Prowl, and we'll do a -C for Microsoft, -E, and this is going to set what we want to search for. And as I said, we're going to use first initial, which is the FI, and last name is LN at Microsoft.com. And what this prowl tool does, it will actually search through LinkedIn, and it will search for Microsoft users who are said to be working for Microsoft through their LinkedIn profile. As I said, social media is a very, very powerful place to gather intel from, and specifically through LinkedIn. And so this will not only will it pop up their email address as they're listed publicly in LinkedIn, but it will also list information about their title. So you probably wouldn't want to try to send a phishing email to a software engineer. They're probably going to be, not as susceptible to that. So, but if you see somebody who's maybe a marketing major, they're looking for CVs perhaps. Then well, perhaps we can slide something in through a CV or through a resume with some sort of script attached to it and get in that way. So that's another common way that these tools in Kali are used for phishing attempts. And let me pull this other tool up for you. SMTP to go is a site that I've used before as well. Let me reload it, make sure I'm still logged in. And what SMTP to go does is it's basically a stand-up temporary SMTP server. And this is commonly something along these lines are commonly used a lot of time in phishing attempts. And so if I go inside of Kali and there's a tool, send email, get that up for us. You can see again all the different options here, and using the intel that we continue to gather, we do a send email. F is for your fake address. So I'm actually going to spoof an address here, and I'm going to say it's from adamant@cisco.com, and I'm going to send that to myself. If I do a -T, I can insert my own address, the address that I'm going to send it to. Now I have a temporary email box here. And I'm going to paste that address in there. U, let's see, U is the subject. We'll just say hello. -M is the message, and we'll just say send your login info. Now, hopefully that would be it would require much more than that to fool you, I would hope. So, but just as an example, and then we'll do our temporary server, smtp2go.com, and they use port 2525. XU is the username for the account that I've set up. Let me grab that. And XP is the password. Let me look through it here. It looks like I've got my syntax wrong somewhere. So if we enter that into our send mail, and what would happen is over in our temporary email box, it would actually appear in my now I use a temporary box, but we can, as I said, you can spoof this to anybody that you want to, and when it shows up, it's going to appear to be from admin@cisco.com. So that's a common phishing technique, and a lot of times, I did miss my dash here. And a lot of times, as I said, this is a common phishing technique, and things will be bundled into these spoofed email messages. and they'll be sent out. So that's a way of active reconnaissance. Now, attackers won't move on to these sorts of active reconnaissance unless they're pretty sure that there's some important vulnerabilities there that they can exploit. So active, as I said, passive reconnaissance is where they'll typically start out at with those passive attempts. And then if they find enough important information or enough things that look interesting, then they'll move on to those active attempts. Let me pull our slideshow back up for us now. We'll close some of these windows out. All right, there we go. And as I said, active reconnaissance, there's lots of different methods. I just made an example of a few. And there are lots of different methods for that. So a very important thing, a very important method. And not only to know, now I know this looks pretty nefarious from our side. It looks like this is something, and you definitely wouldn't want to do these types of things on a live network, mind you. I am working on a virtual machine. So that is sandbox. So don't go to work or don't go to some lab and start working on these in a live environment. That's a bad idea. Not good at all. So why do we need to know active reconnaissance? These seem kind of shady. Well, again, as I said, these are important pen testing techniques. If we want to test our own networks, if we want to find the holes, then these are some common techniques that we want to do ourselves. Now, how do we protect against this as security professionals? One important way that we can do that, there's a lot of different methods, and we'll go through several of those. Network segmentation is important. So I'm commonly had used this. We had a client that I serviced who had a machine shop inside of their business, and they had hosts inside that machine shop, and their machines required Windows machines to control different mills or different lathes. But they didn't require internet access. And so what they would do is they would set up these machines and they would not have internet access. They would have what's called an air gap. And air gapping, physically air gapping, is actually just physically not being able to reach that outside internet, not having access to the public internet. Now, this may not be practical for everyone. You may have to reach that public internet. And so a different method of air gapping is through things such as layer 3 firewalls who can granularly filter that traffic, and they can decide what's permitted and what's denied, what's allowed to come in and out of the network. So that's another great option. If you can't physically air gap your machines, and most people can't, quite honestly, then you need some sort of filtering device in place, such as, at the very least, a firewall that can provide you some system isolation. Another important concept to network segmentation are jump box or jump servers, you may have heard them called. And you can see here in this example, we have a remote admin, which could just as easily be any sort of remote attacker. It doesn't have to be a remote admin. It could be anybody who's trying to access our network from the public internet. It goes through a firewall, and then in this topology, we have a jump box or a jump server. And that's another barrier between our important email and file servers. And this would typically be accessed maybe by system admins, or by network administrators. And what it does is it gives us, it's called a jump box because it's a jumping off point to other parts of your network. People can't come in from the public internet and directly access other servers. They would have to go through the jump box. Now, there are pros and cons to this. And the pros are obviously that if someone does make it through your firewall, there's another layer. So security is all about layers. We talk a lot about the security onion and all the different layers of security. So jump boxes can be another layer to that security. However, if the jump box itself is ever compromised, then that's very bad. People have a wide open gate into all the other systems that you have. So the important thing about jump boxes is that they're extremely hardened. You want to make sure that they're patched regularly. You want to make sure that all unnecessary ports and services are disabled. So it's very important part. If you use this sort of topology, the jump box security is critical here. Another important part of network segmentation that a lot of us may be familiar with it is VLANs. So VLANs, back in the old days before VLANs, we would have many more switches than this. If we had an office that had 2 floors, they had a floor 1 and a floor 2, and maybe they have a sales department and an accounting department. Back in the old days, you would have another switch right up here in this area and maybe right down here. And you would have to have a dedicated switch on each floor for the number of VLANs that you had. So if you had an accounting and a sales VLAN, you would require 2 switches on each floor, 1 for each VLAN. But now, being able to do VLANs, we do a couple of things. It lowers the cost of our networks because we don't have to spend as much on equipment, and it simplifies management for us as well. And scalability is not as much of an issue. If you have to require a switch for every single department on every single floor, you can imagine that the scalability of that is just an absolute nightmare trying to scale that. VLANs really helped us with that. And this particular example here is using VLAN trunking. We have a single trunk line going down to a router that routes all our network through the layer 3 device to switch those VLANs. So VLANs are another very important aspect to network segmentation that we use nowadays. Honeypots and Honeynets. Maybe you've heard of this terminology before. Honeypots and Honeynets, you don't see a lot of them for a couple of reasons. And one of the reasons is that they can be somewhat expensive to deploy, and also they require a lot of management. So let's define what a honeypot and a honeynet is. Honeypots are simply a vulnerable device that's kind of hanging out on your network, and you're hoping that if an attacker or somebody probing around in your network, if they're looking for a vulnerability, you're hoping that they see that honeypot. You're hoping that they see that honeypot server that's maybe it's unpatched purposefully, it's purposefully vulnerable, but it's separated from the rest of your network. And there are a couple of reasons that we do that. Number one is we want to divert attention from important production devices. If we have something out there that looks really enticing, maybe, and it's not hard to get into either, maybe we can divert the attention away from our important production servers into that honeypot. And number two is we want to gather information about what's called TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. And in order to do that, we have to have a high amount of logging. We have to have a good logging software on our honeypot so that we can go back and forensically see, okay, well, somebody was probing around on our network. They got into our honeypot. What were they doing on there? We want to see all of the tracks they took and be able to kind of reverse engineer what they're attempting to do. And so that's important. And another important reason that we have honeypots. Now, as I said, honeypots, they can be kind of costly. Virtualization has brought the cost of honeypots down, so we don't require necessarily a physical server just sitting around somewhere. We can do that virtually, and that's really brought the cost down. But still, you have to have somebody, as I said, you have to have logging in place. You have to have administration in place, so there's certain overhead for that. Somebody has to be able to administer that network and keep an eye on things. Somebody has to receive alerts if it's compromised. So that's one of the reasons that sometimes it's not practical. And Honeynets just builds onto the concept of a honeypot by putting multiple honeypots out there, or by building an entire false network. And that false network, one important thing about it is it has to look real. So if you have a bunch of servers out there that are interconnected and somebody logs in and they see, okay, well, this has a baseline version of Windows Server 2012 installed on it. There are no documents on it. The hard drive's empty. It doesn't take long to poke around and figure out that, okay, well, this looks like a dummy server, or this doesn't look like a production device. This looks like a new server that nobody's using. So it doesn't take long for somebody to log in and figure that out. So in order for a honeynet to be effective, it has to appear like it's an important part of your network. And so again, that's why sometimes these are not as practical, or you don't see them as often, especially inside smaller organizations. Now, inside larger organizations that have lots of resources, you might see one. You might see one of those, but there's so much cost involved for administration and trying to make it look like it's important that you don't often see them. So those are some important network segmentation. And going back through all of the demos that we went through for Nmap sweeps, those are important part of network segmentation too. We can segment ourselves not only as a whole from the network, But if we segment ourselves over specific ports, if we know there are services we're not using, if we know we're not using FTP, we can close down port 20 or 21. If we know we're not using SSH, close that down, close those ports out. So it's important that we, keep up through all of these tools that we mentioned, and there are lots of different tools, but through tools that we mentioned to check our networks, see where the holes are, do some sweeps and do some scans. And that's not a one-time set it and forget it, by the way. That's not a one-time that you go in there and check it and, okay, we're good. We don't have to think about it anymore. No, that's an ongoing issue because things change so very much in the security world that we have to keep on top of everything. So those are the main topics, guys, that I wanted to talk about today. As I said, I was going to have a really short webinar today, so it wasn't going to be very huge. It wasn't going to be long.
Hey, this is Kevin again. I want to give you another big thank you for joining us for Charles's webinar on Cyber Ops. In fact, if you enjoyed this webinar and you want more ongoing Cyber Ops training from Charles, check this out. We're just in the process of launching our Diver Down Security membership. You might be familiar with the Diver Down routing and switching group that I've already got. In fact, that one right now is closed to new members. We've been closed for months because we hit capacity and we want to be able to take good care of everybody that's in there. So no new members in that group right now. But for security, we just opened it up. It's at about 50% capacity right now. So depending on when you're watching this, there is time to get in. But here's the deal. Every month, Charles is going to be going live and he's going to be going through the CCNA Cyber Ops curriculum. And you might have heard me talk before about how critical it is that we all get up to speed with Cyber Ops. We talked about the projections at around 2019 or 2020. There's going to be about 6 million jobs available in Cyber Ops, and 1/4 of those will be unfilled. They'll be empty. And Cisco, they're really pushing Cyber Ops. This is something that we all need to be conversant with. And I recommend that everyone in the Cisco world get their CCNA Cyber Ops certification. And this is a way to do it, where you can walk through it with Charles monthly with live sessions with logically designed, digestible chunks of information. And this is going to be a great opportunity during those live sessions to ask Charles your questions. And if you do happen to miss a session, we encourage you to attend live, but if you have to miss a session, there's going to be a replay of each session available within about 48 hours, and you'll be able to access all the previous recordings as well. And I like to say something I've learned from my Diver Down routing and switching group: you'll come for the content, but you'll stay for the peer group. You see, we charge a minimal fee to belong to this group every month, and by setting that minimal barrier to entry, it eliminates people that are just searching the web for free stuff. It eliminates people that are just kind of tire kickers and have a casual interest in something. These people are voting with their wallets and they're saying, yes, I'm serious about this. I'm committed to getting my CCNA Cyber Ops. I'm committed to advancing my career. Those are the people I want to hang out with. And there will be discussion groups for each session where you can mingle with your peers and you can help one another. Charles is also going to be sending you a weekly email study plan, and this is going to be super valuable in keeping you on track. And the monthly fee, that minimal barrier to entry that I was telling you about, is just $49 a month, and yes, you can cancel at any time. But because you've watched this webinar, I want to give you some bonuses. And the first bonus I want to offer you is access to Charles's new course, CCNA Cyber Ops video training series. In fact, as I'm recording this, if you watch this video as soon as it comes out, it's going to be April 2018. And as I'm recording this, Charles is currently producing this course. But by joining today, you get access to all the videos that he's already done, and he's cranking out about 5 new videos a week. So at the end of each week, you've got new videos to watch until the entire thing is there. And you can go buy this right now. You can get pre-release access to this on my website, and you can pay $297 to get that course. Or you can just join this Diver Down security group for $49 a month, and you get access to that $297 course. Here's another bonus for you. Recently, I came out with a brand new course focused on your success in your IT career. It's called Your IT Career Success Blueprint. And in that course, we go through a real-time workshop on your career goal setting. I give you strategies for landing your dream job. What should you do and not do on your resume? How do you handle the technical interview? We talk about starting your own IT company. Maybe you want to do that to get experience for your resume, or maybe you want to actually do that full time. You want to run your own IT consulting company. We'll give you strategies for doing that. We also go through my 7-step model for exam preparation for any Cisco exam. There's also a module on time management. We look at some of the popular time management approaches out there. I tell you how I approach my week and my day. And we also have a module on customizing your specific certification path. What certification should you be studying for now? What should you study for next? What's long-term look like? Is a CCIE right for you or not? It's not for everybody. We discuss that in that course. And you can go out and buy this course right now on my website for $97, or you guessed it, you can get immediate access to the entire course just by joining Diver Down Security. So for $49 a month, you get access to the live monthly sessions with Charles, being able to ask Charles questions, networking with a group of committed peers, getting a weekly email study plan, and you get access to those bonuses. Charles' CCNA Cyber Ops video training series, which has a $297 value. My IT Career Success Blueprint video training series, which has a $97 value. But the only way to get that is to go to this site, webinar.kevin.live. Again, that's webinar.kevin.live. Not .com, it's .live. So webinar.kevin.live, you can sign up for this $49 a month membership. And just like my Diver Down Routing and Switching group, we'll be shutting this off to new members once we reach capacity so that Charles can make sure and interact with everybody in that group. And if that has already happened by the time you watch this video, when you go to webinar.kevin.live, there'll be a place to put your email address to get on the waiting list. So depending on when you watch this video, you might be able to sign up right now, or you might be able to get on the waiting list. Either way though, I encourage you to go to webinar.kevin.live and join Charles for this immersive cyber ops training.